Lift up your heart and praise. Lift up your hands and praise. Lift up your voice and praise.
And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart. And you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Shabbat shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. It's a blessing to be here today. One of the things that I want to talk about is, tomorrow we're getting together for Shavuot. Okay, and so we're going to be talking about Shavuot today, and I thought we'd go over a few things concerning it. Some you may be familiar with, and some you may not be familiar with. So let's take a look at the command to observe this day. And first of all, it's one of the 3 commanded feasts of Yahweh. So let's look in Exodus chapter 23. Shemot chapter 23. We're going to start reading in verse 14 and be on page 81 in the 98 ISR. Exodus 23 verse 14. 3 times in the year you are to observe a festival to me. Guard the festival of unleavened bread. 7 days you eat unleavened bread as I commanded you at the time appointed in the month of Abib. For in it you came out of Mitzrayim, and do not appear before me empty-handed. And the festival of the harvest, the first fruits of your labors, which you have sown in the field, and the festival of ingathering at the outgoing of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field. 3 times in the year all your males appear before the Master Yahweh. So we see also that this is one of the 3 times in the year when all of your males are to appear before Yahweh. And these are at the times when Yahweh demonstrates that He will sustain us at these 3 festivals. All right? And it's also the time that Yisrael would bring an offering from to Yahweh from the increase of their land. Now, oftentimes when I ask folks, what does the Scripture say about Shavuot? Frequently the answer is, well, not a lot. But maybe we can change that today. All right? We get a little more information in Exodus 34. So let's turn to Exodus 34. And we will be starting on page 95 in verse 18. And it says, Guard the festival of unleavened bread. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread as I commanded you in the appointed time of the month of Abib, because in the month of Abib you came out of Mitzrayim. Everyone opening the womb is mine, and every male firstborn among your livestock, whether bull or sheep. But the firstborn of a donkey you ransom with a lamb, and if you do not ransom, then you shall break his neck. Every firstborn of your sons you shall ransom, and they shall not appear before me empty-handed. 6 days you work, but on the 7th day you rest, in plowing time and in harvest you rest, and perform the festival of weeks. That's what we're talking about today, for yourself, of the first fruits of the, what are those next 2 words? Wheat harvest. All right? And the festival of ingathering at the turn of the year. 3 times in the year all your men are to appear before the Master Yahweh, the Elohim of Yisrael. Okay. We know that unleavened bread is for the barley harvest. Okay. Here we learn that Shavuot relates to the wheat harvest. Okay. And then there's this part about all your men appearing before Yahweh. And of course, at a harvest time would be a perfect time to bring tithes and offerings, right? Okay. But is that all that Yahweh cares about, tithe and offerings? Is that the only significance to Shavuot? I don't think so. Sometimes Yahweh does things on multiple levels. Sometimes. All right? And I believe that to be the case in Shavuot. You see, when we observe these 3 times in the year and all our males appear before Yahweh, what are we participating in? We're participating in a covenant command. Are we not? Well, what covenant might that be? Would it be the covenant that Yahweh made between himself and Israel on Mount Sinai? Sure it would, right? There's a long-held belief that Yahweh gave this covenant to Israel at Shavuot, right? So we're going to take a look at some things here. Now, numerically, in which month did Israel come out of the land of Mitzrayim? First month. Okay. Let's look at Exodus chapter 12. We're going to start reading in verse 1. Shavuot chapter 12. And verse 1. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aharon in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, this month is the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of the year for you. So everybody that said number 1, you were right. All right. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th day of this month, each one of them is to take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. All right, now skip down to verse 6. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, and then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it between the evenings. All right, now, flipping on into chapter 13, in verse 4, it says, today you are going out in the month of Abib. All right, now skip down to verse 17. And it came to be when Pharaoh had let the people go that Elohim did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, though it was nearer. For Elohim said, lest the people regret when they see fighting and return to Mitzrayim. So Elohim led the people around by the way of the wilderness of the Sea of Reeds. And the children of Israel went up armed from the land of Mitzrayim. And Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him, for he certainly made the children of Israel swear, saying, Elohim shall certainly visit you, and you shall bring my bones from here with you. And they departed from Sukkot and camped in Etham at the edge of the wilderness. All right. So we see that Abib is the first month of the year, right? All right. That's when we keep Passover. And you don't have to turn here unless you just want to real quickly. Numbers 33:3 says, so they departed from Ramesses in the first month, on the 15th day of the first month, on the morrow of the Passover, the children of Israel went out with boldness before the eyes of all the Mitzrites, which is what we just read about, and that shows us which day of the month that is. All right. And then let's look at Leviticus 23. YHWH 23. And we're going to be on page 129 and start reading in verse 4. Leviticus 23, verse 4. These are the appointed times of Yahweh, set apart gatherings which you are to proclaim at their appointed times. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evenings, is the Passover to Yahweh, which we just read about. And on the 15th day of this month is the festival of unleavened bread to Yahweh. 7 days you eat unleavened bread. On the first day you have a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahweh for 7 days. On the 7th day is a set-apart gathering. You do no work. All right. And the Feast of Unleavened Bread has significance because it corresponds with Yahweh bringing Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. All right, specifically. All right. Now, Exodus 16:1 says, and they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. All right, it's between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month. after going out of the land of Mitzrayim. Okay, so we see here we're up to the second month, but we're not to Sinai yet. Then Yahweh teaches, we're going to go through what happens during this. At this point, Yahweh teaches them about the Sabbath with the manna and the quail in the following verses of chapter 16. And then in chapter 17, Yahweh brings water from the rock, and Yisrael is attacked by Amalek, and Yisrael prevails. And then in chapter 18, Yithro, the father-in-law of Moshe, brings Zipporah in. You're all familiar with these accounts here. And Moshe's two sons, and recommends that Moshe sets up heads over the people to rule over matters and to bring the hard things to Moshe. And then in chapter 19 we read this. So turn to Exodus 19. Shavuot chapter 19. We'll start reading in verse 1. In the what month? The third month. After the children of Israel had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, on this day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. Okay, now, tomorrow is Shavuot for us, right? What month are we in? Number 3. We're in number 3. By the way, I was riding down the road, and I saw wheat ready to be harvested coming right down the road. Amber waves of grain. All right, ready to go. All right, verse 2. For they set out from Rephidim and had come to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. So Yisrael camped before the mountain, and Moshe went up to Elohim and Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, This is what you are to say to the house of Yaakov, and declare to the children of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Mitzrites, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And now, if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples, and all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set-apart nation. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel. And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yahweh commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, All that Yahweh has spoken we shall do. So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Moshe, See, I am coming to you in the thick cloud, so that the people hear when I speak with you and believe you forever. And Moshe reported the words to the people, and Yahweh said to Moshe, Go to the people and set them apart today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their garments and shall be prepared by the third day. For on the third day Yahweh shall come down upon Mount Sinai before the eyes of all the people, and you shall make a border for the people all around, saying, Take heed to yourselves that you do not go up to the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall certainly be put to death. And not a hand is to touch it, but he shall certainly be stoned or shot with an arrow, whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, let them come near the mountain. And Moshe came down from the mountain to the people and set the people apart, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, Be prepared by the third day, do not come near a wife. And it came to be on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of the ram's horn was very loud. And all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moshe brought the people out of the camp to meet with Elohim, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. And Mount Sinai was in smoke, all of it, because Yahweh descended upon it in fire, and its smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace, and all the mountain trembled exceedingly. And when the blast of the ram's horn sounded long and became louder and louder, Moshe spoke, and Elohim answered him by voice. And Yahweh came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain, and Yahweh called Moshe to the top of the mountain. And Moshe went up, and Yahweh said to Moshe, Go down and warn the people, lest they break through unto Yahweh to see, and many of them fall. And let the priests who come near Yahweh set themselves apart too, lest Yahweh break out against them. And Moshe said to Yahweh, the people are not able to come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, make a border around the mountain and set it apart. And Yahweh said to him, come, go down, and then go up, you and Aharon with you. But do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to Yahweh, lest he break out against them. And Moshe went down to the people and spoke to them. Now we're in, now we're in chapter 20, verse 1. And Elohim spoke all of these words, saying, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery. You have no other mighty ones against my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of that which is in the heavens above, or which is in the earth beneath, or which is in the waters under the earth. You do not bow down to them nor serve them. For I, Yahweh your Elohim, am a jealous hell, visiting the crookedness of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generation, to those who hate me, but showing kindness to thousands, to those who love me and guard my commands. You do not bring the name of Yahweh your Elohim to naught, for Yahweh does not leave the one unpunished who brings his name to naught. Remember the Sabbath day to set it apart. 6 days you labor and shall do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim. You do not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, and the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart. Respect your father and your mother, so that your days are prolonged upon the soil which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. You do not murder, you do not commit adultery, you do not steal, you do not bear false witness against your neighbor, you do not covet your neighbor's house, you do not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, or whatever belongs to your neighbor. And all the people saw the thunders, the lightning flashes, the sound of the ram's horn, and the mountain smoking, and the people saw it, and they trembled and stood at a distance. And said to Moshe, you speak with us, and we hear, but let not Elohim speak with us, lest we die. And Moshe said to the people, do not fear, for Elohim has come to prove you, in order that his fear be before you, so that you do not sin. So the people stood at a distance, but Moshe drew near the thick darkness where Elohim was. And Yahweh said to Moshe, say this to the children of Yisrael, you yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from the heavens. You do not make besides me mighty ones of silver, and you do not make mighty ones of gold for yourselves. Make an altar of earth for me, and you shall slaughter on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your cattle. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I shall come to you and bless you. And if you make an altar of stone, do not build it of cut stone, for if you use your chisel on it, you have profaned it. Nor do you go up by steps to my altar, lest your nakedness be exposed on it. Okay, Yahweh continues to deliver the terms of the covenant through chapters 21 and 22 and 23. And then in chapter 24, I guess you saw where that was going. In chapter 24, verse 1, we read, and to Moshe he said, come up to Yahweh, you and Aharon, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Yisrael, and you shall bow yourselves down from a distance. But Moshe shall draw near to Yahweh by himself, and let them not draw near, nor let the people go up with him. And Moshe came and related to the people all the words of Yahweh and all the right rulings, and all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which Yahweh has spoken we shall do. And Moshe wrote down all the words of Yahweh, and rose up early in the morning, and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 standing columns for the 12 tribes of Yisrael. And he sent young men of the children of Yisrael, and they offered burnt offerings and slaughtered peace slaughterings of bulls to Yahweh. And Moshe took half the blood and put it in basins, and half the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people. And they said, all that Yahweh has spoken, we shall do and obey. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, see, the blood of the covenant which Yahweh has made with you concerning all these words. You know that oftentimes we read a good bit here. And the reason we read a good bit oftentimes is, we don't want to have one of these situations where the minister stands up and reads a verse and then tells anecdotes for the next 30, 45 minutes. All right? We read this because we want to get the full context of it. All right? Amen. Okay. So, you know that the wheat harvest is the most important harvest of the year, right? Did you know that? It's the wheat harvest that sustains life more and from which you rely on more than any of the others. All right? The harvest at the year's end is the one that brings the greatest variety. Okay? But the wheat harvest is where you get your bread. All right? Is it any coincidence that Yahweh gives the covenant to Yisrael here in the third month at the time when we celebrate Shavuot? Is it any small thing that all your males should present themselves at this time? At the time when Yahweh gave the covenant to Yisrael. Sounded like a pretty big deal. Amen? Sound like a pretty big deal. All right? But let's look at another incident and see if this was only a coincidence too. All right? Do you remember how the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant and put it in the house of Dagon? Okay. During the time of Shemuel, while he was a youth serving before Yahweh with Eli, we used to say Eli, the priest. All right. Yisrael had fallen into serious apostasy. I don't think there's any such thing as frivolous apostasy, is there? Okay, they had fallen into apostasy. All right. The Philistines had come against Yisrael to do battle and was prevailing against Yisrael. So what did the people think would be a really, really good idea to help us out? They decided to take the Ark of the Covenant out from the most set-apart place and bring it into the battlefield so as to save them from their enemy. Kind of like a good luck charm. It's like Yahweh can't, if we'll follow Yahweh, He can't protect us while the ark's in the tent. But if we bring it out here, everything will be better. All right. Well, what happened? The Philistines totally wore Yisrael out. All right. And Eli and his two nasty little sons, all three of them died that day. Also, the esteem of Yahweh departed from Yisrael that day, and the Philistines carried away the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh. Now, for what a big day that was on Mount Sinai a while ago, this was not a great day for Yisrael, was it? All right. This was not good for Yisrael at all. Well, then Yahweh plagues the Philistines with rats and tumors, and he broke the head off of their mighty one, Dagon. Right? And the Philistines finally decided that they needed to get rid of this ark and to get Yahweh out of their midst, as if they could. All right? Turn with me to 1 Samuel chapter 6. First Samuel chapter 6. We're going to start reading verse 1, page 284. First Samuel 6, verse 1. And the ark of Yahweh was in the field of the Philistines for 7 months. And the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners, saying, what do we do with the ark of Yahweh? Let us know with what we should send it to its place. And they said, if you send away the ark of Elohim of Yisrael, do not send it empty, but you shall certainly return it to him with a guilt offering. Then you are going to be healed, and it shall be known to you why his hand is not turned aside from you. And they said, what is the guilt offering which we return to him? And they answered, the number of the princes of the Philistines, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden rats. For the same plague was on all of you and on your princes. And you shall make images of your tumors and images of your rats that ruin the land, and you shall give esteem to the Elohim of Israel. It could be that he does lift his hand from you, from your mighty ones, and from your land. And why do you harden your hearts as the Mitzrites and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? That's pretty impressive right there, you know it? When he had severely dealt with them, did they not send them away and they went? And now, take and make a new wagon and 2 milk cows which have never been yoked, and hitch the cows to the wagon, and take their calves home away from them. And take the ark of Yahweh and put it on the wagon, and put the objects of gold which you are returning to him as a guilt offering in a chest by its side, and send it away, and it shall go. And you shall see if it goes up the way to its own border, to Beth Shemesh, then he has done us this great evil. But if not, then we shall know that his hand has not come against us. An accident it was to us. It wasn't an accident. All right. And the men did so, and took 2 milk cows, and hitched them to the wagon, and shut up their calves at home. And they put the ark of Yahweh on the wagon, and the chest with the gold rats, and the images of their tumors, and the cows went straight for the way of Beth Shemesh, and went along the highway, bellowing as they went, and did not turn aside right or left. And the princes of the Philistines went after them to the border of Beth Shemesh. And they of Beth Shemesh were reaping their what? Wheat harvest. Wheat harvest, huh? Reaping their wheat harvest in the valley, and they lifted their eyes and saw the ark and rejoiced to see it. And the wagon came into the field of YHWH of Beth Shemesh and stood there. And there was a great stone, so they split the wood of the wagon and offered the cows as a burnt offering to Yahweh. Okay? Is that a coincidence too? That the Ark of the Covenant would return to Yisrael on Shavuot at the wheat harvest? Huh. Hear a bunch of people going, huh? Yeah. All right? And that the Scripture is careful to make sure to include that one, I'll say a little detail, maybe it's a big detail. That one detail is preserved at that time when it was given originally. Is that a coincidence that's kept in there about the wheat harvest, and that's when the covenant comes back? Interesting. I think that Shavuot has much to do, yes, with the wheat harvest. But I want to think about something that Yeshua said. In Deuteronomy 8:3, just one verse, turn there if you can get to it real quickly. It says, and he humbled you and let you suffer hunger and fed you with manna which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, to make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. Now in Matthew 4:4, when Yeshua is being tempted by Hasatan, he says, but he answering said, it has been written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. Could it be that that's the reason that the covenant was given at that time? All right? Because we rely on bread. All right? But even more than bread, it is the word of Yahweh that gives life. Everlasting life. That's why this one-day feast is so important. All right? That's why all your males appear before the Master Yahweh at this time, because Shavuot is about life. All right? The good life, the Tov life with Yahweh. Now, I've got a little something for you Torah-keeping Yahshua believers to ponder. The 7 days of unleavened bread reminds us of Israel's journey to the Sea of Reeds, and by the hand of Yahweh given deliverance from the bondage, both physical and spiritual, of Mitzrayim. Amen? All right? Was not the goal of this journey to bring them to Mount Sinai so as to deliver them the new covenant? All right. All right. Romans chapter 10. We're going to be on page 1095. We're going to start reading in verse 1. Romans 10, verse 1. Truly, brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to Elohim for Yisrael is for deliverance. For I bear them witness that they have an order for Elohim, but not according to knowledge. For not knowing the righteousness of Elohim and seeking to establish their own righteousness, they did not subject themselves to the righteousness of Elohim. For Messiah is the goal of the Torah unto righteousness for everyone who believes. Now, I want to take a quick little look at this word that's translated goal in the ISR. Because you see, the KJV translates this verse a little differently. It says Christ, of course, is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believeth. All right? Now, this is one of those famous one-liners that people will use to support the idea that the Torah was done away with by Yahshua, and all you have to do is believe in Him for salvation. All right, but let's talk about something real quick here. This word that's translated goal and of the law and goal of the Torah and end of the law in KJV, respectively, is the Greek word telos. All right. That's where we get telescope from. All right. Now, according to Strong's, it says to set out for a definite point or goal. That's the first part of the definition, to set out for a definite point or goal. Properly, the point aimed at as a limit, that is, by implication, the conclusion or of an act or state. In other words, it's the thing that you're trying to attain, the thing that you're working for. That's what we're shooting for out there. That's the goal. That's the end to which we want to come. Not the end of the thing, but the end that we want to get to. All right? And when it says that Messiah is the goal of the Torah, it's not wrong to say end if you understand what it means by end there. The end to which we hope to achieve, not the end of the law of the everlasting words of Yahweh. All right. Keep your finger. That's not the whole definition of Strong's here. It gets long. It can trying to see if there's anything here that's because it can also mean to put a levy on someone or something like that. But that's the first part of our definition there, and that makes a lot more sense than saying the end. The all be done now, it's over with. All right. Keep your fingers in Romans 10, and I want to show you an example of some places where it is obvious that the word end would be a bad choice for that same word. Okay? Let's see which of these makes more sense. 1 Timothy, don't lose your spot now. 1 Timothy, chapter 1, page 1152. Now, we're going to start reading in verse 5, but I'm going to read the KJV version of this to start with. And it says, "Now the end of the commandment is charity out of a pure heart and of a good conscience and of faith unfeigned." The end of the commandment. All right. Now, let's look at what it says in the ISR. Let's see if goal makes more sense than to say the end of the commandment. Now, the goal of this command is love from a clean heart, from a good conscience, and a sincere belief. Does that make a little more sense? Let's keep reading. "Which some, having missed," the goal is in italics there, "turned aside to senseless talk, wishing to be teachers of Torah, understanding neither what they say concerning what they strongly affirm. And we know that the Torah is good if one uses it legitimately." How do you say the end of the command and turn around and say the Torah is good if it's used legitimately? Okay, that's not a good choice there then, is it? All right. What does used legitimately mean? It means being used in the way that Yahweh intended, right? Okay. Verse 9. "Knowing this, the Torah is not laid down for a righteous being, but for the lawless and unruly, for the wicked, and for sinners for the wrongdoers and profane, for those who kill their fathers or mothers, for murderers, for those who whore, for sodomites, for kidnappers, for liars, for perjurers, and for whatever else that is contrary to sound teaching, according to the esteemed good news of the blessed Elohim, which is entrusted to me." Hallelujah. All right. Here's another one. Look at 1 Peter chapter 1. Page 1179. Don't lose your place in Romans. And if you do, you'll just have to turn there in a minute. 1 Peter, we're going to read in verse 9. I'm going to tell you how it says in the KJV first. "Receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls." Okay, that's what it says. Verse 9 in the KJV, "Receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls." Now, this is what it says in the ISR. "Obtaining the goal of your belief, a deliverance of lives." Now, what makes more sense? The goal, right? All right, so let's go back to Romans 10, understanding how much more sense that goal makes and not in. All right, Romans 10, verse 4. "For Messiah is the goal of the Torah unto righteousness to everyone who believes. For Moshe writes about the righteousness which is of the Torah. The man who does these shall live by them." Well, if it's the end, all right, well, she'll live by them. "But the righteousness of belief speaks in this way. Do not say in your heart, who shall ascend into the heavens?" Now, remembering that he just called Messiah the goal of the Torah. Okay, remembering that he just said that. All right. "Who shall ascend into the heavens?" That is, to bring Messiah down, to bring the goal of the Torah down. Or, "Who shall descend into the abyss?" That is, to bring Messiah up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is, the word of belief which we are proclaiming. If you confess with your mouth that the Master Yeshua and believe in your heart that Elohim has raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. For with the heart one believes unto righteousness, and one confesses with the mouth, and so is saved. Because the Scripture says, whoever puts his trust in him shall not be put to shame, because there is no distinction between Yehudit and Greek, for the same Master of all is rich to all those calling upon him. For everyone who calls upon the name of Yahweh shall be saved. Hallelujah. All right, now, let's look at what Paul's quoting here. Deuteronomy chapter 30, because he's specifically looking at a particular passage here. Deuteronomy 30, we're going to start reading in verse 9. We're going to be on page 218 in the 98 ISR. Deuteronomy 30, verse 9. And Yahweh your Elohim shall make you have excess in all the work of your hand, in the fruit of your body, and in the fruit of your livestock, and in the fruit of your ground for good. For Yahweh turns back to rejoice over you for good, as he has rejoiced over your fathers, if you obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim to guard his commands and his laws, which were written in the book of the Torah. If you turn back to Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being. For this command which I am commanding you today, it is not too hard for you, nor is it far off. It's not in the heaven to say, who shall ascend into the heaven for us and bring it to us and cause us to hear it so that we do it. Nor is it beyond the sea to say, who shall go over the sea for us and bring it to us and cause us to hear it so that we do it. For the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart to do it. See, I have set before you today life and good and death and evil, and that I am commanding you today to love Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in his ways, and to guard his commands and his laws and his right rulings, and you shall live and increase, and Yahweh your Elohim shall bless you in the land which you go to possess. But if your heart turns away and you do not obey, and shall be drawn away, and shall bow down to other mighty ones and serve them, I have declared to you today, you shall certainly perish. You shall not prolong your days in the land which you are passing over the Jordan to enter and possess. I have called the heavens and the earth as witnesses today against you. I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore you shall choose life, so that you live, both you and your seed, to love Yahweh your Elohim, to obey his voice, and to cling to him, for he is your life and the length of your days, to dwell in the land which Yahweh swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Jacob, to give them. Do you think that when Yahweh says he wants his commands in your heart and in your mouth, to do it, to obey the voice of Yahweh, that it's not too hard for you, and that it is life to you? And since Yahshua said that he came to fulfill the Torah, commanded us that we shouldn't think that he came to destroy it. Do we really think that Paul is quoting Deuteronomy and telling us that Yahshua is the end of the Torah? That would make Paul look pretty foolish, I mean. Right? Do we think that the end of the Torah, or that he meant the end of the Torah, or the goal of the Torah? The goal. He meant the goal. Do you realize that Yahshua's ministry had the same goal as the journey out of Mitzrayim? It was to lead us to Sinai, where Yahweh made the covenant with us, with his people, and gave us the Torah of life. I guess if you look at it that way, we can see why Paul compared Yahshua to the Passover. Because that was what the Passover turned into, was getting the children of Israel out of Mitzrayim and getting them to Sinai. Okay, Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2. We're going to be on page 1049. Acts chapter 2, verse 1. And when the day of the festival of weeks had come, does everybody realize what day that is? Shavuot. We don't have to keep all this stuff in the New Testament, right? And when the day of the festival of weeks had come, they were all with one mind in one place, and suddenly there came a sound from the heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them divided tongues as of fire, and settled on each one of them. And they were all filled with the set-apart Spirit, and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them to speak. Now, in Jerusalem there were dwelling Yehudim, dedicated men from every nation under the heaven. And when this sound came to be, the crowd came together and were confused, because everyone heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying to each other, "Look, are not all these who speak Galileans? And how do we hear each one in our own language in which we were born? Parthians and Medes and Elamites, and those dwelling in Aram Naharaim, both Yehuda and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, both Phrygia and Pamphylia, Mitzrayim, and the parts of Libya around Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Yehudim and converts, Cretans and Arabs. We hear them speaking in our own tongue the great deeds of Elohim." And they were all amazed and were puzzled, saying to each other, "What does this mean?" And others mocked, saying, "They've been filled with sweet wine." But Kepha, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said to them, "Men of Yehuda, and all those dwelling in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen closely to my words, for these men are not drunk, as you imagine, since it's only the third hour of the day. But this is what was spoken by the prophet Joel, and it shall be in the last days, says Elohim, that I shall pour out my Spirit on all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams, and also on my male servants and on my female servants I shall pour out my Spirit in those days, and they shall prophesy, and I shall show wonders in the heaven above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. And the sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and splendid day of Yahweh. And it shall be that everyone who calls on the name of Yahweh shall be saved. Men of Israel, hear these words. Yeshua of Nazareth, a man of Elohim, having been pointed out to you by mighty works and wonders and signs which Elohim did through him in your midst, as you yourself also know, this one, given up by the set purpose and the foreknowledge of Elohim, you have impaled and put to death through the hands of lawless men. Him Elohim raised up, having loosened the pangs of death, because it was impossible that he could be held in its grip. For David says concerning him, I saw Yahweh before me continually, because he is at my right hand, in order that I should not be shaken. For this reason my heart rejoiced and my tongue was glad, and now my flesh shall also rest in expectation, because you shall not leave my being in the grave, nor shall you give your kind one to see corruption. You have made known to me the ways of life. You shall fill me with joy in your presence. Men and brothers, let me speak boldly to you of the ancestor David, that he died and was buried, and in his tomb is with us to this day. Being a prophet then, and knowing that Elohim had sworn with an oath to him of the fruits of his loins, according to the flesh, to raise up the Messiah to sit on his throne. Foreseeing this, he spoke concerning the resurrection of the Messiah, that his being was neither left in the grave, nor did his flesh see corruption. Elohim has raised up this Yeshua, of which we are all witnesses. Therefore, having been exalted to the right hand of Elohim, and having received from the Father the promise of the set-apart Spirit, he poured out this which you now see and hear. For David did not ascend into the heavens, but he himself said, Yahweh said to my master, sit at my right hand, until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Therefore, let all the house of Yisrael know for certain that Elohim has made this Yeshua, whom you impaled, both master and Messiah. And having heard this, they were pierced to the hearts, and said to Kepha and the rest of the emissaries, Men, brothers, what shall we do? And Kepha said to them, Repent, and let each one of you be immersed in the name of Yeshua Messiah for the forgiveness of sins, and you shall receive the gift of the set-apart Spirit, for the promise is to you and your children, and to all who are far off, as many as Yahweh our Elohim shall call. And with many other words, he earnestly witnessed and urged them, saying, Be saved from this crooked generation. And those, indeed, who gladly received his word were immersed. And on that day, about 3,000 beings were added to them, and they were continuing steadfastly in the teaching of the emissaries, and in the fellowship, and in the breaking of bread, and in the prayers. And fear came upon every being, and many wonders and signs were being done through the emissaries. And all those who believed were together and had all in common, and sold their possessions and property, and divided them among all, as everyone might have need. And day by day, continuing with one mind in the set-apart place, and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising Elohim and having favor with all the people. And the Master added to the assembly those who were being saved day by day. Is it also a coincidence that the Ruach was poured out on that day, and the Word made flesh revealed to these men on Shavuot? See, you just never know what might happen when you appear before Yahweh as He has commanded us 3 times in the year. Amen. These are 3 very great events in the history of Yisrael. Right? So, the next time someone asks, what is Shavuot about? Instead of saying, not a lot, you can say quite a lot. Amen. All right. The covenant given, the covenant returned, and the covenant made flesh was made known. Yevrekeka Yahweh ba'ishmereka ya'er Yahweh panavaleka bikuneka yasa Yahweh panavaleka v'yasem lakash shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make His face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up His face upon you and give you His complete contentment.